It's the summer of 1915 on the Western Front. You're sitting in a trench, the ground shaking from artillery shells, the smell of gas hanging in the air. Suddenly, you hear a hiss. Not like artillery, not like a machine gun. A scream echoes down the line. Fire! Then a wall of flame shoots high over the trench. Men leap out in panic, others burn where they stand. For the first time, soldiers face a weapon that doesn't just kill. It turns fear itself into a weapon. The flamethrower. Fire as a weapon is as old as war itself, from burning arrows to the Byzantine, Greek fire. But only the technology of the early 20th century made portable flames possible. In Germany, engineer Richard Fiedler was already experimenting before 1910 with pressure tanks, igniters, and thickened fuels. At the same time, Captain Bernhard Redemann pushed for military application, shaping pioneers and volunteers into the specialized storm pioneers who would later carry this new device into the front lines. The first great shock came on July 30th, 1915, at Hooge in Belgium. German stormtroops used flamethrowers against British lines. Eyewitnesses say the British soldiers were completely unprepared. Shells and gas they already knew, but a roaring wall of fire sweeping across the trench line was something entirely new. The number of dead was lower than after a heavy bombardment, but the psychological effect was far greater. British reports spoke of sheer horror. The war had found a new language, the thunder of flame. Two types of flamethrowers. There were two main types of flamethrowers in World War I. The small flamethrower, Fiedler device, a man-portable system with fuel tanks and nitrogen pressure. Weight, 65 to 75 pounds. Range, 20 to 25 yards. Burn time, just a few seconds, suited only for short, brutal assaults. The large flamethrower, stationary, weighing several hundred kilograms. Deployed in positional warfare, it could hurl flames up to 40 yards, but had to be emplaced ahead of time. Both had one thing in common. They were extremely dangerous for the operator. A single bullet into the tanks meant instant death. And just carrying one through a trench made the gunner a prime target. It was clear from the beginning, the flamethrower was no solo weapon. In the storm pioneer platoons, teams of 4 to 8 men drilled precise routines. Advance under the cover of mines, explosions, and smoke, often at dusk. Riflemen suppressed loopholes and windows. The flamethrower struck at short range, often followed by a hand grenade. Then stormtroops rushed in with clubs, knives, and carbines to clear and hold the captured trench. Training was strict and exacting, checking seals, filling tanks, testing igniters, practicing hose handling, and above all, discarding the weapon after a burst, because once empty, the operator was defenseless. Instructors emphasized psychology. A calm operator gave confidence to the team. Hesitation put everyone at risk. World War I was a war of trenches and bunkers, where artillery and machine guns ruled. Here, the flamethrower found its place, not a miracle weapon, but a tool for the dark corners of trench warfare. Dugouts, tunnels, firing slits that even heavy shells could not destroy. Its true strength appeared when men were face-to-face in close quarters. At Verdun, defenders reported that even a short burst of fire could silence an entire casemate, not because everyone died instantly, but because smoke, heat, and panic broke their will. At the Somme and in Flanders, flamethrowers could not decide huge offensives. But in the fight for trench sections or isolated pillboxes in the mud, they tipped the balance. A burst, a flash, and machine gun nests that had resisted for hours were suddenly silent. On the Eastern Front, with its weaker, often wooden defenses, flames were even more devastating. Blockhouses ignited in seconds, entire dugouts became fiery traps. And in the South, at Caporetto, the flamethrower became part of a new doctrine. Small storm units combining gas, grenades, and fire to smash through weak points and collapse entire fronts. Time and again, the same lesson appeared. The flamethrower was not a weapon for mass assaults. It was a psychological weapon of close combat, destroying not only men but morale. Soldiers feared less the short flame burst itself than the realization that no place was safe. Not in a trench, not in a bunker, not even underground. The Allies did not stand idle. They built flame traps in trenches, firewalls, and flame ditches where the jets would smother out. Snipers were given top priority targets: fuel tanks, ignition lances, operators. Fragmentation shells were designed to pierce hoses. At the same time, the Allies developed their own heavy but awkward devices, such as the French Schilt system. They were used less often, but even so they carried psychological weight. Fire was no longer a German monopoly. The shock wore off, troops adapted, and the sheer terror of the first attacks began to fade. What remained was the value of fire as part of a combined assault: flame, grenade, and stormtroop. Few weapons carried such an open moral burden. Flamethrower operators knew they were hated, not just by the enemy, who often branded them inhuman and threatened immediate execution, but sometimes even within their own ranks. Survivors often stayed silent, not only because survival rates were low, but because the memories of what fire did were burned too deeply. Veterans spoke of nightmares, of smells that came back decades later, of quiet tables in veterans' homes where no one asked and no one told. The flamethrower was never a miracle weapon, never the solution to the stalemate of trench warfare. Its strengths lay in short, decisive strikes, closing loopholes, clearing dugouts, forcing defenders to abandon a strong point. Its weaknesses were obvious: short range, limited burn time, weather sensitivity, mechanical fragility, and heavy losses if the attack failed. Used in the right context, with smoke, mortars, and stormtroops, it was disproportionately effective. Used alone, it was a death sentence. By 1918, every major army had flamethrowers in some form, but they remained niche weapons. In the German spring offensives, they appeared here and there. In Allied counteroffensives, even less. Mobile warfare gave little room for such fragile assaults. After the armistice, general staffs summed up: tactically useful, operationally limited, morally troubling. There was no ban. The Geneva Protocol of 1925 targeted gas, not flame, so the weapon lingered into the interwar period. Improved seals, more reliable igniters, lighter designs, all led directly to the models that would see a grim resurgence in World War II. The World War I flamethrower was a weapon of intimacy. It forced men to face each other at arm's length and to burn that closeness away. That was its terror. It rarely decided battles, but it opened doors for others to push through. It gained yards, not miles, but those yards cost a disproportionate number of lives. Those who carried it bore more than tanks. They carried the knowledge that they were hunted. Those who faced it learned that no corner of a trench was truly safe. That is why the story of the flamethrower in World War I is not just a story of technology. It is a human story of courage and fear, of invention and survival, of seconds that decided life or death. And it still burns in memory today.